Aliens, Ed Gein, Phil Schneider, and my favorite sticker in the bunch was one he sent me of Doc Holliday from Tombstone, who is quoted as saying, "I have not yet begun to defile myself." He also sent me a tank top with Jeffrey Dahmer on it. Can't beat that, so thank you so much, Mr. Cantwell. Visit his shop at Voorhees138.bigcartel.com. I was recently invited on with Derek Hayes of the Monsters Among Us podcast to be a guest commentator. This was for his Season 3 finale. Two other guest commentators on this season finale included Toby Schofield of the Secret Transmission podcast and David Flora of Blurry Photos. If you like Into the Fray, I highly encourage you to check out all of the podcasts just mentioned. If you are in the area of Frankfort, Kentucky, you may want to check out CryptidCon. They will have lectures, vendors, and the opportunity to meet and mingle with some top researchers and authors in the field of cryptozoology. David Weatherly, Lyle Blackburn, Seth Breedlove, Bill Brock, Nick Groff, Cliff Barrickman, Greg and Dana Newkirk, and Robert Robinson, to name a few. This conference commences on September 9th and ends on the 10th. I have a number of tickets to give away for this event, so on any of these social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, share any CryptidCon post and tag me in it for a chance to win these tickets. Visit IntoTheFrayRadio.com for all episodes, complete show notes, blog posts, and to sign up for Insider. Don't forget to rate and review Into the Fray in your podcatcher of choice. Please like us on Facebook, and feel free to join the interactive group. You can get your ITF gear at intothefrayradio.threadless.com. I would love to see you sporting any ITF gear you've purchased. Without further ado, here's another listener story, never before heard. A big thanks to Luke for coming on with me to share.
Shannon.
Hey Luke, how are you? Yeah, the storm, it came and it dumped a bunch of rain, and there's still some thunder out there, but it's mostly moved on. So I'm out like in the boonies on the edge of town, so whenever there's any weather, which doesn't happen often, of course it has to happen right before I record, but it really screws the things out here.
Right.
So, yes. Well, yeah, let me do a little intro for you, and we'll get it going.
Cool.
On this episode, I have Luke Johnson, and he is calling me from the state of California. So, Luke, from what I understand, these are encounters that you haven't told a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, I've predominantly told people I really trust, my mom, of course, who's actually experienced a couple things with me, my sisters and my wife, maybe a couple friends over the years, but for the most part, I've learned, for me personally, I've learned kind of not to overshare these things.
Yeah.
So.
And what were your friends' reactions?
My friends, I don't know. I think I might have one or two friends that I've told, or maybe a couple more. Who knows over the years? Probably 4 or 5 throughout the years. And I have one for sure who believes me with like a capital B. And then I have my other friends who I've told that are really close friends that say they believe me. I don't know how much they believe me, because oftentimes I get these sort of looks like, huh? Like sort of a dog when a dog cocks his head.
Yeah.
Kind of looking at you that way. And that's kind of how they look at me. And that doesn't really bother me. I mean, I really understand it because it is such odd stuff. Yeah, so probably one or two who, really kind of pick and prod and then are really genuinely interested, and the others kind of, again, give me the head nod.
Just wondering, the one that is the capital B believer, is this friend, did they maybe hint that they have had their own experiences and that's why they're kind of more on board with everything?
Yeah, I mean, that friend for sure has had over the years some encounters with what I would call the supernatural. And so, yeah, it makes sense that he would for sure back me on that. And the others, I'm not sure. If they have, they maybe have talked themselves out of it, but they've never quite, told me that they have. So, Yeah. So that one for sure, I know just from talking to him over the years that he's had quite a few encounters as well.
Yeah, I was just wondering about that because anytime it comes up at work, and most everybody knows at my work, but when it does come up, they're kind of like, oh no, I mean, I've never had anything weird happen to me, but then they'll come up at a later time and they're like, actually, you know what, there was that time. And then it's not so weird anymore and you're like, haha, I knew it.
Right.
Most people, if they're willing to admit it, I think have had something. Most, not all, but I think that most have. So.
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of helped friends, I think, unearth maybe the reality that stuff has possibly happened to them. Again, they may not be full believers, but definitely I've gotten some friends to the point where they could kind of respond like, yeah, you know what, I could see how that might be that. I mean, I've had friends experience incredible pressure on top of their body at night and like sort of a foul smelling dog breathing over them, and how they've brushed that off as a bad dream, I don't know. But I had to kind of walk them through it because I've experienced so many things, and ask them and kind of poke and prod. Hey, were you awake? Were you not awake? Oh no, I was awake. Okay, well then why would you tell yourself it was a dream? You know, again, it makes sense because believing, I think, in the supernatural, the paranormal, all these hyper sort of strange things completely, I think, turns your paradigm upside down, you know, and.
Yeah. Making those excuses, it helps you to be able to go to sleep and stay asleep at night. Especially with things like that. If you actually thought, oh my God, I think there really was something sitting on my chest. Nah, you're just going to go, it's a dream so that I can live a semi-normal life anyway. Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, if you don't mind, we'll jump right into your encounters here.
Okay. Well, I can just start from an early age. I mean, I started having angelic encounters at about the age of 3 or 4, where I would chronically tell my mother that I saw a winged woman in the bedroom. And my mom, having grown up in Catholicism, sort of had a background in sort of concepts of angels and demons, and she would believe me and she would talk to me about it. But, you know, again, it was a 3 and a 4-year-old telling her these things, and I remember one particular encounter when I was probably about 4 at this time. My mom left to go cook breakfast, and I was just sort of sitting in the room. It was probably 6:30 in the morning, 6:45 in the morning, totally awake. In fact, my sister was still asleep, just watching my sister sleep and kind of just rubbing my eyes and looking around, and then this winged woman, that's the only way I can describe her, just sort of materialized, and kind of was walking towards me, and I was utterly frightened and ran out, and of course went and tugged at my mom's dress and said, "Hey Mom, there's a winged woman in the room," which of course frightened her because, you know, she wondered if maybe I saw like an actual person in the room, and ran in and there was nobody there. But those occurrences happened quite a bit.
So was it always she would materialize and attempt to walk towards you?
You know what? No, she came quite often to me in different ways. The most common definitely would have been like a materialized sort of just coming out of like thin air. Just all of a sudden there. It's hard. It's just so fast. It's amazing. It's hard to even put into words how fast, I guess, she would materialize. And when she would materialize from afar, probably 10, 15 feet away, and kind of slowly walk towards me, she never would say a word or anything. She would just look at me, and she had these, the one thing that I can remember was she was definitely very beautiful. Not to sound cliche, but she was definitely gorgeous. Had this blonde hair and this it was almost like radiation, just this light that would kind of flit off her hair, and her eyes were actually colorless. Were I wouldn't say like beams of light, but how can I compare this? If you were to take like the beautiful part, like the inside of an abalone shell, I guess, and that sort of that gorgeous kind of opaque coloring with a little bit of, pink in there, and then were to kind of flash a light behind it, that might be kind of how I could describe her eyes.
That's a very cool description of that. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, and then she also came to me quite a bit in the dark, where she wasn't that way. And when she would come to me in the dark, she would talk to me. It's kind of interesting. I'm assuming it's the same angel. I don't know. To this day, I've kind of wondered. I've always assumed it was, because I definitely buy into the belief that we do have like an angel that's coupled to us that does maybe not manipulate our lives, because I believe definitely in free will, but is there to aid maybe and be a light when we're going through maybe a dark time. So I've always kind of assumed that this was the same angel, and when she'd come to me at night, she would speak to me about all sorts of things, but she wouldn't be, of course, bright and glorious. She would be just like you or anybody in the dark, just an outline of a person, and by my bed on her knees and talking to me.
What about during the day? Could you see through her, or was she completely solid entity?
I remember her. I remember not being able to see through her. Again, it was sort of like just a gorgeous being that wasn't necessarily see-through, materializing, and again, maybe just her eyes being kind of see-through a little bit, maybe. But besides that, no. I mean, like a beautiful woman materializing with wings, and was definitely clothed, wasn't nude or anything. And
what was she wearing?
She was wearing just like a very simple gown, not like a wedding dress or anything kind of like that. Just this sort of
almost like classic angel garb, like a robe of some sort, almost.
Yeah, and I wonder if she, if she materialized that way because my mom had this gorgeous old, I don't know if you've seen them, but there's these beautiful old Catholic Bibles that were more popular probably in the past. And they were these white leather-bound Bibles, and it was the full Bible inside of it, of course, with the Book of Maccabees, a couple other editions, and it had these gorgeous just paintings and pictures that would kind of lead you through the experience of reading the biblical text. And I remember the angels maybe in some of those perhaps kind of looking a little like that, but definitely she wasn't wearing like outrageous, gorgeous clothing. I mean, I've seen probably women walk in similar dresses. Just a kind of a flowing, comfortable, not even fully white, maybe pearl-esque kind of summer dress, Yeah.
So what about at night? You said that she would talk to you. Do you remember was this a one-sided conversation where you were just listening, or were you guys conversing between each other?
No, fully conversing. In fact, I can tell you, I value the first encounter, because the first encounter was when she actually introduced herself to me. And she didn't tell me her name or anything, but she came to me, and I was probably about 4. And my mother was, in fact, I saw my mother because my mom used to light a candle sometimes in the bathroom. And we lived in a small little house. I mean, it wasn't a large house by any means. So one light in the bathroom could kind of illuminate enough to kind of differentiate people. And my mother was asleep in the bed, and my sister used to sleep with her in the bed. And then I was in this twin bed, probably 5 or 6 feet from my mother's bed. And, no, she materialized again, and must have been there before I woke up. I woke up and I kind of came to, and I was looking around, and then I looked down, and there's this person, and it was a female because I could see her hair. And, she asked me why I woke up. And I said, I don't know. Who are you? And she said, I'm here, to guard you. So, and then I just kind of picked her brain. I don't remember the full conversation. It's hard because I was so young, but I just remember talking to her and asking her, why are you here to guard me? And she would say, there's reasons that you need help, someone to look after you, which is why I've always assumed that, I met my guardian angel, so. Were
you guys talking out loud?
Yes, which is so interesting because we had full conversations whenever she would materialize this way, and my mother would never wake up.
Oh.
Yeah, never would wake up, my mother or my sister.
So your mom and your sister, they never saw this angelic being?
My mom has never, my mom that we can get into the things that my mom has seen with me, but she has never seen the quote unquote winged woman, which is a kind of a phrase that my family passes around now, like around the kitchen table. Hey, Luke saw the winged woman, But yeah, she's never actually saw them. Now there was a time, I can tell you, where there wasn't necessarily like a materialized angel, but I can tell you this, and my mom could verify this. There was a time when in the same house we were asleep, and for whatever reason the faucet was dripping quite heavily that night. There was a leak, and it had filled up she had left the plug in the kitchen sink, and the water was filling up, and we were asleep, and we never would have known if it would have spilled out. And I will say this, and it was really kind of interesting, and my mom to this day goes, God, I don't know if that happened, that was just sort of chance or something incredibly interesting and spiritual, but she had a radio that didn't have batteries. It was just sort of a plug-in, and it was unplugged, and the radio went off loudly, and my mother hopped up, just freaked out. I mean, why is the radio going off? Goes into the kitchen, and it was unplugged, but yet giving off a signal and going off, and she looks at the sink, and it was, right on the precipice of spilling over. Why angelic or hosts or whatever they are that want to help people out would care enough about a sink spilling over? Right. I don't know, but they clearly did, because a radio that wasn't plugged in woke my mother up.
Did that radio ever do anything strange after that?
Never again.
That is so cool. What did I have written down here? Oh, how long did this go on between you and the angel, the winged woman?
There's the because you're digging these things out of me here.
That's okay.
Probably until about 7 or 8, like a more formidable age, when maybe I don't know. The experiences kind of stopped at about 7 or 8. I will say that, I have my theories. I had to take on kind of more of from a very early age, my father wasn't around, so I had to take on a little bit more of like a male role, I think, in the house. Mm-hmm. And I had a great childhood. My mom was great, but just because of that imbalance, I had to kind of do that. And I wonder if sometimes, that's why I sort of stopped seeing the angels, or the angel, at about that age, just because maybe I had passed over into sort of a different kind of frame of mind, something that maybe I was not, maybe I was less open because I was having to kind of grit down, So that's been my only theory as to why at about the age of 7 or 8, the angels stopped materializing. Now, of course, as I aged, I had more sort of supernatural encounters, but the angelic experiences, I probably stopped at about 7 or 8.
Do you have any theory as to why it started?
Oh gosh, you know what? I'd like to stroke my ego and say that I'm called to something.
Right.
I think we all would like to think that. I don't know. I know that I've grown. I know that my mother's lineage, my grandmother was a highly spiritual lady. And by spiritual, I mean a very devout seeker. A lady who would pray and meditate more than the average human, quite a bit more than the average human. And so definitely had kind of a gift there. And my mom's always been somebody who's had a lot of encounters. She's had her own encounters, not just with me, but growing up has definitely had a lot of demonic encounters and then of course some angelic encounters too. So I do think that sometimes there are such things as like lineages. I think that for whatever reason people are, I don't know why, some people seem to be more maybe cosmically open to things. And I'm just like a normal guy. I cuss and I drink whiskey and and I have any normal fleshly craving that any man or female does. I'm not some incredible guru, but I definitely do think that there are, again, lineages of people that maybe are a little bit more open. Now, also on my father's side, my great-great-grandmother was a woman who walked the Trail of Tears and was actually a medicine woman. So there might be some roots there too. My father's kind of this good old boy who lives out in the woods and would probably gawk at my stories. I've never actually told him my stories, but what's interesting about my father that I will say is my mom to this day says your dad can literally speak to plants and they grow, which is kind of a cool thing to think about.
That is very, very cool.
Right. Yeah. And the only thing I can link that to is his grandmother, his great grandmother. And I've asked my dad, I said, hey, cause he has this gorgeous garden, and I say, hey dad, what do you do for this garden? Because most people have to just tarry and pull weeds and it's just a crazy hard work. And he goes, nothing, just a light sprinkle of water once a week and pat him on the brow and say, go for it.
A little sweet talking.
I'm like, Dad, that's just not normal.
That is awesome. Yeah, I wish I had a quarter of that kind of power.
I know.
Oh my gosh. So that is really interesting, the whole Trail of Tears. Do you have a whole lot more background on her, as far as being the medicine woman, and do you have any specifics on that with her?
Yeah, so, I definitely know that a couple of her potions or whatever you'd call them, mixtures, elixirs, whatever you want to call them, based out of she'd use roots from the desert and all sorts of things. My father definitely, they were passed down, and my father was probably the last person to sort of experience them. He never, of course, passed them on. Again, I think because of just his makeup, I don't think he really is. I think he's one of the people who doesn't want to necessarily go there with these things. But so that definitely stopped with him. But him and his brothers definitely experienced some of her, I guess, just infamous medicines. And my dad says that there was this one that he used to drink that was incredibly bitter. Whenever he would have any sickness, which I thought was so interesting. It wasn't necessarily like a flu or a cold or whatever. It was any sickness he remembers. Anything. It could be a pulled muscle. And he would drink this bitter drink, and he said literally within an hour or two, whatever it was gone.
No kidding.
Right.
All from natural stuff.
Just, whatever juju she had going on with the earth, definitely was taking care of things for sure.
That is very, very cool. Because you can't help but try to at least look back at history for all of these things. I don't care if it's ghosts or demons or alien abduction, but a lot of times, as we have found out in a lot of these reports, sometimes it starts with the father, the mother, the grandparents, right? So it is interesting to look at the history of families. You have to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I'm a firm believer that things happen, that all lineages, if you look at them in some form or another, have something that you can kind of trace, whether it be not always, of course, connection with the supernatural or the cosmos, or again, like you said, with sort of alien abduction things or whatever, demonic stuff, but even just sort of what I would call like the mundane, gifted kind of things. Like why do professional athletes' sons or daughters tend to be professional athletes? Right. Why them? I guess people could say genes, but still, how did that happen? Why are there these sort of special genes for these athletic families,
Yeah, I don't know because I haven't heard any of your story yet, but I'm just wondering, what does the angel kind of set you up for later? Like maybe she was kind of a segue into everything so that there is a light to combat the dark. But I'm just kind of wondering where it goes now because I don't know where it is going, which is half the fun, of course, of doing this. But okay, so the angel stops coming to you around 7 or 8 years old.
Right.
And at that point, how much of a break do you have before anything else happens?
I would say probably quite a long time. I had a break from about the age of 7 or 8 to, probably 16 or 17.
Okay.
So about an 8 or 9 year stretch there of time where I would call it like my dormant period. And then again, when it restokes, it's rather short too. It's probably 2 or 3 years after it kind of restokes, things kind of got crazy again. But I don't know. You know, one of the interesting things about the supernatural is I'm constantly telling people who know my stories, and still to this day, my sisters love to talk to me about my stories because it is so interesting, you know, and we like to kind of pick out reasons why things maybe happen or not, and oftentimes I just kind of shrug my shoulders, you know. I don't know why I saw this angelic presence for 3 or 4 years. I mean, definitely, like I said, my father wasn't around, and my childhood was rather I would say rocky. So there definitely was some like emotional stuff there. And so I'm positive, you know, when I first met her and she talked about being there to kind of ward back things, you know, I'm assuming she's talking about, you know, demonic presences, talking about strongholds from my father, who's, you know, got things going on for sure. And so she was sort of there, I think, to, again, ward back the dark, because as we all know, the supernatural works as like a yin and a yang, which is an ancient belief system that there's dark and there's light. And when you're open, I believe, like an open orifice to those things, you're going to experience both, you know. So yeah, why from 7 or 8 to 17 there was a large break, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, it does seem like just like UFOs, they'll have the multiple sightings. It'll be a flap, and then there'll be nothing for years or months or whatever it may be, right? It seems like you're going through the same thing, which a lot of people, they hear the 16 or 17 age, and immediately the flag of, oh, well, it was, you know, puberty comes up, and I think it's, I'm sure that it's tied in somehow, but I think it's deeper than that. Like maybe, you know, maybe it's just your brain, like you said, you're just open to different things. Your brain is changing. I'm sure your brain changes a lot from 7 or 8 to 16 and 17 years old.
Yeah, you know, and I should make a point too in saying that I think the part of my story that might kind of add into the conversation is, you know, I grew up incredibly poor. I grew up in welfare lines, and, you know, sociologists and people who study people, essentially, you know, cultural psychologists and so on and so forth, talk about how, you know, kids that come from poverty, you know, are in a constant sort of state of survival, and like, it's like an alarmist state, you know. And again, I had a great mom, but she couldn't combat everything. And so I think, you know, when you're younger, I was experiencing all this turmoil with my dad and all these things, but still I was young where my mom was still kind of setting the table. But once I hit a certain age where she really like needed my help, I think I went into kind of more of an quote unquote fatherly role in the house, and had to kind of go into that survival mode. And some people believe that when you go into these survival modes, that's when angelic encounters really happen. I've always encountered the opposite. You know, I've always encountered, you know, when I go into this sort of mode of, I'm actually in one right now as a father. When I go into these modes where I'm just putting the hand to the plow, I find that the spiritual, all these things that you really have to be open to and take time to listen to, kind of shuts off, you know. So that might be another reason as well too, is, you know, I was in this, going through this sort of impoverished childhood, and had 2 sisters, and my mom had to work a lot, and there was all that kind of constant stirring in the house of just, you know, where's our rent money going to come next month? And I think that when you're so incredibly focused on one thing like that, and again, it's about survival, and it comes down to that base level, I just don't think you have time to sit there and kind of interact with the supernatural, you know.
Yeah. So what was the next odd thing that happened to you?
Well, quite a bit actually. When I was 17, I had a dream, and in my dream, I'll just say that Jesus came walking on water, which is sort of a classic image, and he landed on the sand, and he kind of pointed to me through a crowd of people. And on this dream, there probably were, I don't know, 500 people on the sand, and seeing this happen. And I remember he just walked up and he pointed at me in this dream, and I just kind of was like, why me? Why me? Just, kind of wanting to hide behind people. And after that dream, the floodgates kind of opened. I started, whispers started waking me up. And I would get up and meditate. And I really became an incredible seeker in the sense that I would pray, Shannon. It's going to be hard. It's hard to believe, but I would pray like 4 to 6 hours a day.
Wow.
Yeah, which is funny because, I tell people that part of the story sometimes and they don't say much, but I'm like, wait, hold on a second, 4 to 6 hours. And that's not me tooting my horn. That's like, because I've never been able to do that again.
Okay. So
no,
that is so interesting. So is this at one clip? You're sitting down for 4 to 6 hours most of the time straight through?
I would have sort of like, it would just depend, it kind of depended on the day because I also was, going to high school and I had to work and do all these things, but definitely on a weekend, I'll say when again, there's that time aspect and being maybe in less of an alarmed state. If I had time, I would put a sign on my door and I would close the door and I would tell my mom, my sisters knew, don't go in the room. Luke is seeking, and I would have these sort of outer body kind of shamanist experiences where I would come to and literally like my clock, I'm not kidding, Shannon, would fast forward 3 hours,
But you would, in no way did you feel like you were gone, if you want to use that term, right? That you were gone for 3 hours.
No, well, what would oftentimes happen is I would begin like this. I would go in my room and, I should start by saying that I was raised sort of in a classic Protestant church. And I would go in my room and I would open the Bible and I would just call this cliche, but I would just randomly open it. And I would randomly open the Bible and I would look at the first text that I saw and I adopted sort of like this thing that I learned from a Dominican priest, which was meditating on scripture. And I remember talking to this priest and he told me, he said, when you meditate on scripture, you just keep meditating, and through the repetition of speech, you'll notice sort of like you almost in a sense leave your body, but you're present. He said it's like this weird kind of middle ground. And I started practicing that, and I would kind of I would rock. I would have these kind of rocking sort of meditations. If you've ever seen the poet Allen Ginsberg do his meditations, he kind of would do similar things, kind of just this rocking kind of repetition of this scripture. And I would sometimes have these encounters, Shannon, where I would kind of leave my body in a sense that all of a sudden, and the only way I could describe it was like I would suck up, like I would hear a vacuum and I would suck up into this realm of like layered light and speak to the light and ask the light all sorts of questions.
And what do you think the light was? Or who, I should say. Who or what?
Because of the religious background I grew up in, I'm comfortable calling the presence God, but you could for one, I would like to say, just put that on the record that, God is not male or female. So you could call God her, him, God, whatever God is, the cosmos, whatever you want to say, whatever people want to use, when they talk about the universe, some people just use the word the universe, that phrase. So whoever that higher entity is that I think kind of is the palpable presence driving everything in the universe and then all humanity and everything, I would go up there and I would just talk and ask questions. And oftentimes the presence would respond with the inverse, a question with a question. Which is kind of interesting. Like the presence, and I'll say they. I've gotten used to saying they because the pronoun wouldn't work with the presence that I met, so male or female. They, which again would kind of make sense with the old kind of Christian Catholic belief regarding the Trinity. They would always respond with a question back, and it's kind of cool because poets actually, I'm also a published poet, and poets kind of practice this as well, where they'll write a poem and then the question kind of responds with a question. It's sort of like this call and response. And I would just ask a question, what is consciousness? And
so you're asking like the big questions, like what's the meaning of life and why are we on the earth?
What is consciousness? They would respond, are you conscious? just sort of probing me. And I really think it was kind of playful. Like, I really believe that they wanted me to continue to do what I was doing, to meditate, because in the foreground, there definitely would be some really interesting encounters, both demonic and, of course, angelic in the near future for me. But that was sort of the first kind of floodgate that happened after this dream, which is interesting. I can narrow it back to the dream and Jesus looking at me and just sort of pointing through this crowd and me kind of trying to duck out of the way. And the meditation began. And the cool thing about this, Shannon, although I incredibly miss it, so I don't always find it cool, is the cool thing is that crazy meditation period of my life happened. It was a short season. It was like 2 years. And then it was like the well ran dry and I just could not do it worth the life of me.
Like you couldn't even close your eyes for like 20 minutes and you're like,
to this day, Shannon, for me, prayer is really awkward. It's so funny. It's so interesting. You know, I mean, I can get into a place sometimes where I can get in like a meditative kind of, you know, zone. Like
relaxed. But you're not going to be able to talk to they.
I mean, I can, again, right. I mean, if you were to see me now, you know, meditate, it would look like very much like just standard prayer. You know, it looked just, you know, like me for 15, 20 minutes, maybe reading something, not always just a biblical text, but just something, and then kind of just acknowledging thanks and thanksgiving and acknowledging their presence, because I obviously know that they are there. But not these sort of shamanist kind of encounters where I'm kind of outer body and coming back with questions for questions, and sometimes you know, bigger things would happen for sure, you know.
So why do you think you were put through the 2 years where you were able to get to that space so easily?
I will say this, you know, I come from a religious background where we believe anytime we talk about like spiritual and quote unquote gifts, I come from a background where we always fear sounding haughty, so I don't want to sound haughty, but I do think that I have an ability to kind of touch, like when I touch somebody's shoulder, I can kind of, it's like their energy leaps into me. I can feel things intensely, and I think that they, even though I don't necessarily interact with them, and I have my reasons now, they want me to sort of be on the earth as representing the reverse paradigm, you know. I mean, every job I've ever worked, I've felt like a square in a, you know, trying to go through a round through a round hole. Mm-hmm. I just feel different, Shannon. I mean, I'm very normal, but at the same time, I can walk. My wife calls it hot spots. I can be walking, say, downtown in the town where we live, and I can all of a sudden, for whatever reason, be somewhere, and sometimes random. I mean, a wall. I'm not even kidding you. A wall in a parking garage, and I can touch the wall, and it's like I go there. It's so weird. It's like I can feel the hands that built the wall, and just kind of be flooded with this. Again, the only word I can give it is like Thanksgiving.
Is it a vision or a feeling?
It's like a feeling. It's like a surge that kind of goes through my bones and my body, and it's like a high elation. I feel high for a moment, and I definitely kind of leave my body temporarily. You know, like my wife has to kind of bring me back, and it happens sometimes in conversation. Sometimes I can be in conversation, and whoever the person is, that I'm really feeling on like an elemental level, or like a deeper level, like there's something, like I'm tapping into whatever that light source is. My wife sometimes has to kind of touch my leg to kind of bring me back, like, and I kind of come to and go, oh wow, I was doing sort of whatever this is, the sort of shaking kind of presence type of overwhelmed elation.
So what about if you go into a house where you didn't know that 3 people had been murdered, which I know is few and far between that right. Any of us have probably been in a place like that, but anywhere really negative, does that happen to you?
Yes. So, you know, I mentioned I'm a published poet, and it's interesting because I've had so many incredible angelic light forward encounters, I would say, but yet in my art, I'm definitely drawn to the dark. which there, again, there's that kind of balance. Yeah, I mean, I can be in a dark area and it's not going to be the elation that I feel, but definitely like an overwhelmed presence kind of runs through my body.
I mean, to where you have to leave.
You know, I've learned to kind of call it sick, but I've learned to kind of embrace the feeling. I don't know if it's because it leaves. I don't know if it's because I feel connected. I don't know what it is. I don't know why I don't leave. I mean, there have been times, of course, where I've been in areas where I'm like, okay, we got to turn around. I mean, I just don't like this presence here. But it's funny you brought up if you walked into a house, you didn't know 3 people were murdered there. It's funny you brought that up because, I was just talking to my mom the other day about this, and I told her, I said, I wonder if, for whatever reason, had I continued to allow these experiences to happen, and I say allow because really I have been the one that's kind of shut it off. If I would have trained with somebody who understands this type of energy and these experiences with the supernatural, I wonder if maybe I could be somebody who kind of operates, like folks that we all know who work with like the police and help them find bodies. And, I sometimes wonder if there's like that gift there that just hasn't been cultivated, and that's what this sort of moment of, like this kind of elation I'm talking about is, and this feeling of tapping into these hot spots is that my wife, again, has to kind of bring me back. She's learned to kind of touch my back or touch my leg or touch my hand. And then I kind of just come back to like the everyday.
I mean, that is what you hear a lot of these psychics do, right? That's pretty much
right.
Spot on what they do. So you said you've pretty much turned it off, and I know we haven't gotten through all of
right.
your encounters yet, but have you thought about maybe trying to cultivate it or have someone contact you or vice versa and see if you can let it blossom at all?
Shannon, that's such a great question. I live with, and this is sort of why I think my story is interesting, because I'm just a realist and I'm going to tell you straight up how I feel and what it's like for me now. I live with a lot of guilt. I kind of go back and forth. I've shut it off for a lot of reasons. And a couple of the reasons that I've shut it off, of course, I was talking about the alarmist. Now I'm a father and I have to go to work and have all these sort of outside pressures, right, that kind of weed out, I think, that opportunity to just sort of sit at the feet of that great and mighty presence, I'm definitely more of a Martha now than a Mary. And if anybody who knows that biblical story, it makes sense for anybody in anyone's walk in any kind of spiritual endeavor. There's people who get to sit at the feet of the presence and ask those questions like I have, and then people that have to go to work. And for me, I'm in a season where I have to do that. Now also, I've turned it off because I'm just going to be honest. I haven't found like a balance or like a middle ground. When I turn it on, Shannon, it's hard for me to keep a job. I hate to use the word weird, but,
is that because that you'd feel compelled to sit in a room and
right.
for hours and hours and
do your
thing?
I was talking about, when I first started speaking to this presence, when I had this sort of floodgate of this meditation encounter stuff, that was the beginning, was sort of like me asking these questions, these large questions, like you said, which is interesting. It started off macro, and I would ask these big macro questions, and they would respond with a question. But then as we became more acquainted, I kind of would go to them with like small requests, like, is there any message you'd like me to pass to a friend of mine or to my mother, or what do you want? What should I be thinking about? I want to cultivate wisdom. What's just sort of like some basic things that I do that I should try to weed out, and I will say there were a couple times where, they would give me direct messages for people. And I'll tell you one story, and probably the trippiest one was I came back from one of these meditations and they had given me a message for a friend, and I went to this friend and I said, you know what, you might think I'm crazy. In fact, you're probably going to think I'm crazy, but, when was the last time you've spoken to your father? And she looked at me and she said, 9 years. It's been 9 years since my father has ever tried to contact me. And I looked at her, Shannon, and I'm not kidding. And they had told me, tell her 3 days. So I looked at her and I said, your dad's going to call in 3 days, 3 days at 6 p.m. And call it crazy mathematical chance, or call it I really did interact with something. It's one or the other, and I'm going to go with I interacted with something, because I think the likelihood of that random chance is much harder to believe. He called in through 3 days at 6 p.m. Her dad called her at 3 days. It was just incredible. And she called me and she's crying and she says, I don't know how that happened. I don't know. I'm just tripping out. I don't know whatever the heck this was. It was awesome. And, that was definitely probably the most direct, detailed, sort of delivery that they've ever kind of gave me to give somebody. And the amazing thing was it happened.
And was that their inception as far as rekindling their relationship? Does it continue now to this day?
Yes.
That is unreal.
I mean, cool. again, there's a broken relationship there. So, it's not like it's been mended completely, but, they're definitely they're definitely in contact. She goes and sees him. He lives in Costa Rica, and there is some relationship there now.
I mean, to go from 9 years to Wednesday at 6, that's pretty specific, right? Right. Yeah. And so, I mean, as I'm telling you these things and I'm kind of unearthing them, you can see why I kind of keep a lot of these things to myself, And so, you asked me the question about, do I think maybe I could blossom that? And I think I could. And I live with this guilt because I rock back and forth. I have this reverse paradigm, but now I have this, it's like kind of having feet in both places, I also have to worry about changing my son's diaper, so it's like responsibility always comes
up. And like I told you, those messages kind of happen more often when I'm involving myself with them. And I like I said, I mean, I might lose jobs because I all of a sudden feel something that I should tell somebody. And then my boss is like, dude, we don't do that weird stuff here. So
yeah, it's like, get your shit together. We have work to do. Well, yeah. But Luke, have you ever thought that maybe, and I don't want to sound condescending at all, of course, by saying this, and I'm sure it's crossed your mind, but have you ever thought that maybe you have a calling to be a priest or something like that, to where, and I know they're not out there making six figures or anything, but maybe you've got another calling that you have to go answer?
That's very, very, very interesting. I used to believe that, and I'm still open to that concept. I'm definitely drawn to priests. Again, obviously I'm married, so there's that issue there, but I will say the devotion, the closest calling I've ever seen that comes from any type of spiritual leader or whatever you want to call them, cross-pollinating across all religious backgrounds, I definitely relate the most to priests. That sort of intimate devotion. Again, that meditation, priests are very much, people don't know how incredible priests are with their meditation practices. I mean, people just see them doing all this stuff in the church and these sort of, religious rituals, but priests are incredibly devoted, deep people who pray for hours every day. So there's definitely that's probably the closest calling comparison that I could feel close to. Again, I'm just a normal guy in a lot of ways, and so it's scary, I mean, I don't know how to kind of be human and also be tapped into this kind of odd, supernatural presence. So yeah, maybe, it's possible.
And after that 2 years where you could easily go visit you said it just shut off, right? You just couldn't do it one day. It just was gone.
I will be as appropriate as possible, Shannon. I fell in love with a lady, and I was a human, and I just engaged in things with a lady for the first time, and I'm a firm believer that not that you can't, again, be married like I am and be engaged in incredible spiritual things. But if you do look at all sort of religious, mystical, mysticisms, religion, disciplines type of stuff, it's cross-pollinated across all religions. There's one thing in common you'll notice is there's great discipline. Mm-hmm. That's definitely a linkage. When the only people I'm ever skeptical about are the people who say the opposite, who think you can just indulge, and then God or they is just free. No way, Shannon. Like, my experience has been like, it's a price to pay for sure. It's, they, for whatever reason, want that deep devotion. I mean, they are not going to reveal themselves to you unless you really want to go there. And when you really want to go there, you have to knock on the door for a long time, you know. And so, you know, I had this incredible romance for about a year with a lady, and after that, I just never could quite tap back in. I think that there definitely was some of that kind of flesh and spirit thing going on, and not, I don't want to sound like I'm demonizing, you know, romance and connection between, you know, people, but I think it was the first time that I really indulged and allowed myself to kind of just be a man, you know. So ever since then, I just haven't been able to quite rekindle that connection to this higher power, you know. Yeah.
So after the 2 years, you had it shut off again for a while. Right. So what was the next flame up, the next flap for you?
Well, I will say, let me just say that in that 2 years, one of the more interesting things that I wanted to talk to you about that I thought, you know, you might really kind of be interested in was, in the Bible, if you look back in the Old Testament, it talks about God coming as a pillar of fire by night and smoke by day. And it talks about this sort of high priest going into the tabernacle, and this great sort of smoke or fog would fill the tabernacle. And that was God, you know, that was sort of the presence of the divine. And in the Old Testament, that word is Shekinah. They call it the Shekinah Glory, you know, of this sort of divine presence. And this is one of the things that my mother encountered. You know, my mom used to have, you know, things going on, ailments and stuff. So her and I were very close, and I would kind of help her, and I would like rub her arthritic hands and stuff. And one night, I'd prayed for probably, again, I was talking about knocking on the door a lot. I'd meditated for probably 7 months asking to see Shekinah. I just wanted to see what this looked like. I was like a kid asking the candy shop owner, show me the candy, you know. And one night, we're lying in bed. I'd fallen asleep after kind of rubbing her hands, and it's probably 2 or 3 in the morning, and sort of like that witching hour. And I'm lying on my back, and I wake up, and there's this presence in the room, and it was like a net. The best way I can describe it was like this fishing net of stars, coming off of the ceiling or the roof, you know, and sort of like wafting down, just this kind of almost like breathing, like this throbbing net. That's the only way I can describe it. And I knew that I was witnessing Shekinah. And the cool part about this was it's one of the few times I've gotten to have a witness, and I'm lying there, and I'm looking up, and I'm just in awe. I mean, I'm just like stoned. It's so cool, you know. And my mom goes, "Son, what is that?" And I go, "Mom, that I think is Shekinah Glory." And she goes, "Holy cow." I'll never forget that. That was kind of her response. Holy cow. And we just stared for probably 2 minutes, and then both it was like an incredible peace came over us, and we just passed out. Right.
Wow.
Yeah. I've met a couple other folks who have had experiences with Shekinah, but that was.
I've never heard of it.
Yeah. If you research like in the Old Testament, that's definitely like a common thing that would happen during like Moses' time when they're walking through the desert. Stuff like that.
So what is the point of it?
I think, again, you know, I think that the divine, God, I think they're really playful, Shannon. they want to interact with people. You know, I mean, I really do truly believe that that though we're not the center of the universe, that we definitely are like one of their prized possessions for sure. That they look at us like we're like tremendous art, you know, because I believe that they are our creators, and I think that they love to interact. I think that happened because I get to tell the story, you know. I think sometimes we forget that like the divine and all these incredible things happen because it's just about us telling the story. I mean, that's really powerful is, you know, somebody might listen to this and they go, holy crap, that's what I saw. Like, what the heck? Because I never knew what that was, you know, what that was. Oh, was that, you know, that's sort of the beautiful thing about getting to share it, you know? So I just think there's not always this like great purpose. I don't think. I think that's sort of something that we've been taught, is that every time we interact with something like this, even maybe like an alien encounter or these angelic presences or whatever they are, that there's always this sort of necessarily like this message or this thing that has to happen. And I literally think it was just because I'd been praying and meditating and asking for 7 months to see that manifestation. And there it was.
So just meant to be a comfort, some peace, maybe a confirmation. And I'm sure it was very comforting also to have your mom see it too.
There's the word. The word is confirmation. Yeah, it was really great. And then, yeah, of course, it was like, to this day, I am so thankful. I give so much thanks every day for that experience, because to me, that's the one that stands out, because my mother got to witness it. And I feel less crazy, you know, because sometimes when you have all these experiences, you sometimes are like, man, am I just like losing it or what? But, yeah, it was fantastic. You know, it's definitely like my prized experience.
But
sure.
You never had any doubt as to what it was.
It definitely wasn't something dark. I mean, it was this incredible, wafting, throbbing presence. It maybe wasn't by definition Shekinah. I know that in the Old Testament that it's described as like a fog or a smoke. I always assumed it was that because I'd been asking for so long. But whatever that was, it definitely wasn't angelic. It was definitely them manifesting their presence, and it was definitely like a manifestation. Again, like a net, like a fishing net coming off the ceiling and sparkling and kind of like throbbing, and almost like if I could compare it to an animal, kind of like when you go to a nice aquarium and you see those gorgeous jellyfish just kind of lit up and kind of just the way they just kind of gorgeously kind of just sort of rhythm like a bed sheet in the wind kind of in the water, you know. That was sort of kind of how it looked, you know.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet you wish you, I don't know if you can capture them on film or anything, or if you can even paint or draw something like that. If I know I wouldn't be able to draw a thing, but I'm sure that that's probably, I mean, anybody would think that was a treasured memory, I'm sure.
Yeah. You know what? It's funny you said the taking a photo thing. The friend who believes me, he's actually tried to trick them before with the photo, and it's never worked out.
A good them or a bad them?
Like the good them.
Okay.
You know, yeah. He's tried to cause he was having sort of seasonal encounters, and he would set up like his camera. It's kind of a funny story that we both laugh about, and he would set up his camera and try to catch him on.
It's like a Ghostbusters setup, right?
Right. And he would take photos, and of course, like people always, you know, I've talked to other people who have just tried to do the same thing, or they've taken out their video camera, and it's like there's nothing there. You know, it's like they're just taping nothing. I think that, I wish I could do that, but I almost think that they're too playful, and it would almost become maybe a little bit of a mockery too.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I'm sure it would distort the experience. I mean, I'm sure if you pulled out a Nikon and tried to snap a picture, it would just be over.
Right. Which is kind of a beef I have with them sometimes, because I'm like, that's not cool, because, you know, I'm like, hey, you guys gave me all these experiences, and I've told like 7 people, because if I tell people about the throbbing net coming off the ceiling, they look at me like I'm losing my mind.
Yeah, I mean, eyebrows tend to go up, but you know, right. we know our truth, right?
Right. You know, that's why it's, I wanted to tell you, before we even got to start this, I wanted to thank you for bringing me on. I'm a big, I follow the podcast for sure. And, in fact, I just listened to the DDoS one. I think it was episode 83. Mm-hmm. And, I was just, but every episode I'm just wowed. I'm wowed by. I'm just like, oh man, this is just so cool. I mean, and like you said, we know our truth. And one thing that I love about being part of this large community, which is larger than maybe we think it is, with all of us who have witnessed things, like I know that you've seen shadow people, we know that we're not the center of the universe. We might all have different experiences, right? But there's something larger or something more mysterious that's involved in our lives a lot more than we think that there is,
And it's a wonderful feeling.
I'm just blessed and so thankful to be on here talking to you and having this community of people who I can tell these stories to, and they're just amazed and just like wowed by and just think they're so cool, like I do when I listen to DDoS getting to see Sasquatches face to face. I'm like, I'm so jealous. I'm like, dude, that's not cool, man. Right? I want to see
all those popping joints and everything. The dog man standing up.
I could go without that one, but
yeah, that's so detailed.
I mean, some of the stories about like the adolescent and stuff. That's just so cool, I'm like, wow, it's just. Then you had the episode about the, which I know was very dark, but about the really nice lady, what was her name, who had a lot of those demonic encounters, in Bremerton, I think.
Oh, yes, Jennifer.
Jennifer, yes. God, yeah. Jennifer, if you listen to this, you're just an incredible soul. I just was having my experiences. I was there. I'm like, man, that's definitely just, yeah.
It's got to be a whole nother level. I've said it at least 45 times by now, like literally, but I'll say it again. Having it in your own home versus seeing something out in the forest is completely different. I mean.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny you said that. I mean, it's like I had these angelic encounters growing up, and people always ask me, why did you run out of the room? Why were you scared? I've always heard these stories about angelic presences being so lovely that you just are like immersed in their presence.
But they're still not supposed to be there in your room. It's
right.
So freaky.
That's what I tell people. And it's like, I definitely like when I've spoken to this sort of, this they that I've spoken to, there's still like this deep reverence. I feel like they could just like burn me up like a matchstick.
Right. You could be burned to cinder if they wanted you to be.
I mean, so like, people, so there's definitely like a healthy fear, of them. And like when I would see these angels, of course, like this is something so much larger than me, but not just like in size, just in power and glory. I mean, it's like, I was freaking frightened,
Yeah, and it's easy for them to say that, but let's put an angel in their room, right, day or night, and see how they react.
But the cool thing, is now that we're talking, see, now stuff's starting to open up like a tuna can. The cool thing is that she came to me normal at night too, which right. I think shows how respectful these presences of light are, I think. Whereas when we talk about the demonic, it's like the opposite, These presences are so respectful. I mean, she must have, obviously she would see me run out of the room. And,
there's a
right?
Yeah.
And obviously wanted to unveil herself to me, like reveal herself to me. So she would do it. So she did it a few times, even though I'd get frightened every time. But obviously there must have been something going on there at the early stage, like, hey, I'm opening up the door to Luke, kind of knowing that this is a reality early. But then when she came to me at night, just like this normal lady with definitely a very beautiful voice. She had a very softening, kind of soothing voice. But that was when we got to engage, because I was just less scared, There's just like this.
Yeah.
I mean, it still sounds frightening, but I mean, comparatively speaking to this winged human thing coming towards me, I mean, was a little more frightening, but. Yeah,
much more of a paradigm shift there.
Right. So, you asked me about some more experiences. So,
wait, before you go on, I just have to interrupt you really quick. I just wanted to, of course, thank you for coming on and to say that none of this could be possible if you and all of my other guests and hopefully future guests, if you guys were not willing to share, then there would be no Into the Fray. So just thank you for taking the time to come on with me.
Well, Shannon, it's there's the film, the great film with Kevin Costner, Field of Dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And remember when when God or whatever says, if you build it, that He will come.
Yeah.
And it's a testament, and a testimony to you, really, too. I mean, here we are kind of praising each other, but I wanted to say it again, that it's a testimony to you that you have all these amazing people who come on and feel comfortable, because you're the one who sort of built the field,
Thank you.
And like I said, even though there is a larger community than we think who believes these things and experiences these things and interacts with each other about these things, there aren't that many venues where we get to share it and hopefully affect somebody's lives positively. Like somebody else listening going, oh my God, like Luke's talking about this weird net. Oh my God, I've seen that. Or, yeah, I was scared of angels too. Okay, good. It's not a demon. It was an angel,
Well, see, and that's another one of my favorite things about the show is every single time I get on to record Into the Fray, I learn something new. And I know for a fact that, and the whole reason, in fact, that Jennifer came on was because she heard, was it Jim's call, I think? Anyhow, Joe Harbert's call, right? About seeing Jesus in the clouds, and he's talking to her.
Right.
She's like, I experienced that, but I also experienced all of this. And she was ready to finally come out with it. I know for a fact that someone's listening to this in their car or at the gym, which is always flattering, by the way. Thanks for listening. But that they have experiences that they've never told anyone. And maybe someday they will email me, or they will find me on Facebook or Instagram or any of the other places that I try to be open and welcome these people that have never talked about their experiences like I did. I didn't tell my experience until I was in my 30s. So it does feel quite lovely to finally get those stories out. But
oh my gosh,
it's not easy to do, especially the first and second and fifth and sixth time. After that, it gets a little easier, but.
Yeah, and I think it's, also there's also like a lot of wisdom there too. I mean, like there's a scripture that I love that says, don't cast your pearls before swine. Yeah. And it sounds so cruel and rude and mean, and it's not supposed to be mean. It just essentially means like, there's ripe fruit and there's green fruit that's not ready to be picked. And you can kind of say that regarding people. I mean, I have friends, like I said, who would just look at me like I lost my mind if I told them these stories. So I'm not going to tell them these stories.
Yeah.
Not just because of that, because this stuff to me is too important to have it mocked, so I'd rather just not tell it.
Yeah.
But again, having folks like you and then having like people that do trust and listen and share their stories, it's just so incredible to just have somebody go, yeah, wow, that's just amazing, and I'm intrigued, so.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry to take the train off the track. So yeah, you were about to get into another experience here.
Right. So when I was 23 or 24, I started doing some third world work where I would work with the Peace Corps, alongside the Peace Corps, and do just some, just do like community engagement stuff, help build huts and water stuff, and I got to go to Africa for about 2 months. And anybody who's ever known about these much more ancient cultures, is the spiritual to them is like the physical to us Americans, because we're so silly. We're so silly we think that this is all that there is.
Right.
In fact, the spiritual is much more, is more real. I mean, it's this physical plane is kind of just like an illusion to them. And when I was there, I definitely saw some pretty amazing things. I mean, I saw it's going to sound crazy, but I saw a man who was deaf his entire life. I saw his ears. I saw him hear for the first time. A couple other sort of faith kind of encounters with people. I definitely saw a woman who was possessed, for sure. Possessed of some kind of a spirit, frothing, talking in the voice that she never could talk in. I saw that whole encounter, The only times I've ever really gotten to experience the demonic stuff, which again, I'm very thankful for. I'm asking for those things, has actually always come with possession. I've only ever really seen people who are possessed, do those types of demonic things. But yeah, I had that experience when I was in Africa. I saw a person who hadn't heard his whole life. His ears were healed, and I saw a lady who was crippled get up and walk.
So who was doing the healing?
Normal people, actually, which is kind of cool and interesting, kind of changes the whole concept of a healer. Just everyday people who were there who kind of believed in the supernatural and believed that, like, hey, if there's something larger than us, it definitely can heal ailments, and people who would just pray for folks and ask their bodies would be well, and really amazing things would happen.
And you got to actually see the man here for the first time?
I actually got to be, me and a friend were the ones that actually got to lay hands on the gentleman and actually pray. Yeah. And he started weeping. I mean, he lost it because it was like he'd been deaf since his whole life, and he was probably in his mid-60s.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Like I said, I saw that, and then I saw again like a lady who hadn't walked get up and walk, and some really amazing things.
I have a question. Were these folks, and I know this is in Africa, but what sort of, I don't know if you want the word ritual or, what the word is, but what sorts of things were they doing?
When they would pray for folks?
Yeah, like when the man got his hearing back and when the woman walked. Right.
So they were using a sort of like a customary prayer, sort of a customary style of prayer that I think a lot of people use, but you could probably associate more so with Catholicism, where the priest has prayer oil, and it's like usually frankincense and myrrh, which is the biblical oil that they talk about poured over Jesus. And they would just like anoint their forehead, or they would anoint the area that was ailing, and ask God, or however. Usually that was how they verbalized it, was they would ask God, or they'd ask Jesus, or they'd ask just like just the presence to heal their body, and numerous things happened. I mean, people walked who had never walked. I mean, people's ears were healed, like I got to witness. Some really amazing things happened for sure.
Now, do you think that's the power of intent, or is that the power of a bunch of people like you, who I would use the word gifted, let's just use that word, is that a bunch of people like you laying hands on one person, and then it's, a very funneled power going through to that sick person?
I think it's both. I don't ever want to give anybody too much power. I'm in the habit of sort of like trying to make me not special and just a person who's open, so, but I do think that there is something to it. Yeah. I mean, so of course, somebody who believes in these things and allows that presence to kind of believe that presence can kind of interact with their body and maybe impart into somebody else, that's probably part of the equation. But I definitely think that intent, like you said, we are, I believe, spiritual beings. We are from them, so why can't we be part of the equation if we're the one ailing? I definitely think that like there has to be that belief there, that there has to be at least be like a small seed of belief from the person who's ailing.
Right.
That there's something larger, that something can take care of this ailment and make them well, So if I had to have an answer, I'd say it's probably both at play, for sure.
What's your opinion, Luke? And this is kind of going off kilter here, but as you know, I tend to do that a lot. What's your opinion on, people talk about the pineal gland getting calcified, and then that you can decalcify it, and there's a pop, and then supposedly you can be a lot more open to, astral projection, or maybe experiences like you've had, like to where you can pray and you can talk to things or see people, or what's your opinion on things like that? And,
so
you may not have one, but
so you're saying folks who are kind of boiling down all these experiences to that gland. You're saying
no, just maybe the gland in particular. Like, do you think that's tied in at all to any of this, either personally or to the things that you have seen?
I would say yes, and I do think maybe a little bit, because I do think that we are also flesh, and so our bodies can do incredible things. In fact, not to get off base, but you did have a person on, and God, I wish I could remember which episode it was.
You're as bad as me, see? I'm always like, what number episode was that?
He was doing it because he made a point about this. He said, you know what, if it was just me anyways, it was somebody who was saying if it was just like my body giving me a vision or something to that extent, then it's still a phenomenon. And I still want to know why people are having that experience.
Right.
Anyways, so I do think that, yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, is there something, interacting there that's physical? I mean, maybe, but how would just a physical thing in my body allow me to tell a friend after speaking to this presence that their dad's going to call in 3 days? And, I just think here's my thought, and forgive me if somebody listens who's a scientist and this sounds harsh, but I sometimes get a little bit PO'd with this sort of classic American Western empirical data heavy culture. We think we figured it all out. And I just laugh about that because of all my experiences. And it takes a lot more faith, in my opinion, to buy into what's really rather a new phenomenon, which is thinking that we can explain everything that we see through empirical data, which really is just a baby compared to these ancient cultures that honor the spiritual plane, like I said, more so than even the physical plane. I mean, sometimes I compare our culture, our empirical kind of Western culture to, the 7 or 8 year old kid who sticks his tongue out at the parent. We're like thinking that we have it all figured out, and we're sticking our tongue out at these ancient cultures that say the complete opposite. So maybe that glands a little bit up. I don't know, but I don't. I've never liked that theory because I just think that it's too. I think it's haughty with knowledge, and I don't think that. I think man is incredibly flawed, and we tend to be quite, buffoon. We're like a bunch of buffoonery, and if you look at our history, that's true. And we think whenever we think we figured it all out, we're usually incredibly wrong.
I was listening to Dave Schrader on Beyond the Darkness the other day, and I don't know if anyone out there caught this episode, but I was like, go Dave. There was a guest on that said, you know what, just everything paranormal is just flat out bullshit. Like, within the first 5 minutes, and he's on Darkness Radio, Beyond the Darkness, right, with Dave Schrader.
Right.
Who has had his own experiences, but he'll also say if something's BS, it's BS. But I could hear it in his voice, he's like, squeeze me? Did you just say everything? He literally said everything paranormal is just bullshit. It's just nothing. It's nothing. These are charlatans and people, having too much whiskey, like we might do or whatever. I was just, okay. But he finished the show, and I guess the guy at the end was kind of saying something along the lines of, yeah, I guess I should maybe not be as harsh in my wording. And Dave's like, yeah, dude, you got to know your audience. You're on a paranormal radio show, for criminy's sake. So anyway, but yeah, that it just goes along with what you're saying, of that we think that we just know so much and we're so smart, and we have no clue. We have no clue what's going on. And that's why I just throw out random questions sometimes, because I don't know, and I really am wondering what a guest might think on something. So I think that the whole, it ties in with the whole consciousness, and I'm real big on that stuff, and I haven't really done, maybe I need an episode on that, right? I need to get somebody on that with the whole DMT and the pineal gland and the consciousness and the astral travel and all this stuff. Because some might say that, oh, well, Luke was doing astral travel, right, when you were having that 2-year period. Right. It's just a different label to put on it. So it depends on who you're asking, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's what we do as people. We're always trying to put a name on something and figure it out. And that's why I've had to learn from my experience, Shannon, that most of my life I'm going to kind of shrug. I don't know. When I talk to people when I talk to folks who are interested like you are, and people in the future, I mean, they're going to get a lot of shrugs. Like, I can retell the story.
Right, the exact same way, but you're not going to get any answers.
And I can tell folks these experiences, and I can tell them things that when I've spoken to this presence and things that they've said and these experiences. And again, I can have my own theories because I've lived all my life trying to figure it out. But in the end, there's so much I don't know-ness, like you asked me, what do you think that net was, like, what was it doing or what was it there for? And that's like a totally normal question, is trying to figure out, trying to bridge presence, Luke, what's happening. And like I said, my only conclusion I can get from that experience is they're playful. It's like you and I, it's like playing with your son or daughter, I mean, they're playful.
Hey, that's probably the other top thing I've said the most on the show is I like when someone says, I don't know. Because it's okay to say that. So many people are terrified of those 3 words for some reason.
Right. And I think that playfulness kind of, again, not to, obviously I have a crush on DDoS, but that playfulness again can kind of even go into his experience, because here we are talking to a very, by the way, very polite gentleman, very nice gentleman who's out there and doing this amazing thing, and they play with him. I mean, I'm listening to the story and I'm like, they like this guy. Mm-hmm. Like they seriously, like, of course there's still going to be some trust issues, but like, they like this guy, you know? Like if you or I walked in, yeah, we're more open, so maybe eventually if we're with D, they would like us, right? But like, as of now, they can count on one finger the people they like, and that's DDoS.
Obviously Mr. DOS has got that dialed in.
They just like think he's cool and they want to play with him, and they show him interesting things, and then also he respects them, like I was talking about, having sort of this healthy fear of that divine presence, and you can tell in his voice, like he does too. Like you could hear he was like, wow, yeah, like I've had a couple experiences where they've charged at me, and I'm thinking, oh my God, am I going to die? You know, like, so yeah, I think that maybe that's a flaw that maybe comes on our end, Shannon, as people who are seekers, I would call seekers of all these incredible things, is maybe sometimes we're too serious a little bit, you know? We forget to play, you know? Like there's this incredible treasure trove of incredible things that are mysterious, and it's not always, it's not always a serious exchange. You know, it can be just something that's like playful and enticing. You know.
Well, and a good mini synchronicity. And I'm on Skype a lot, you know, doing the recording and doing the show. And I never see him pop on here when I'm on here. But when you were just talking about D this very last time, I saw that he just came online. So he's probably recording for his show right now too. But I don't ever see him pop on at the same time as me. So good little mini synchronicity. How's it going, D?
So Shannon, you know, I was thinking about the shadow people. I've always bounced back and forth, you know, as somebody who's experienced sort of the angelic and the demonic. I've always kind of saw a linkage there, maybe between the shadow people and my kind of encounter. It's my type of stuff that I've encountered. Not to kind of flip the interview, but I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on maybe a possible linkage between shadow people and, I don't want to say demonic, but maybe something kind of connected between this sort of spiritual stuff, encounter stuff, mm-hmm. and shadow people. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, my first answer would, of course, be I don't know. I really don't. But if I had to lean a certain way, I would lean towards something demonic and maybe just running around up here being a trickster and you know, completely out of place. And of course, mine was a lot different and extremely non-invasive. They didn't interact with me. I think that if they would have, if even one of them would have looked my way, and I've said this again, I'm saying all of the top things. I always say so much. I'm sorry, guys, but it would have been a completely different experience if even one of those would have, you know, looked my way, or is waving or whatever. You know, like John Paul Capice's little demon, like waving and smiling and like, oh hell no. That would have been completely different. So for me, it's like I just saw something that was just like a movie playing. I mean, it was definitely there. But I don't know, but I lean that way. Definitely is something demonic.
And so they were just like interacting with them, with each other, and then you were just, they really didn't want to talk to you. It sounds like
they were just running along, but they were running so fast. That is the thing that really, you know, initially grabbed me, because I'm just screaming on that four-wheeler, as I would do a lot. They were quick little machines, and we were kids, and we like to go fast. So, yeah, that was the first thing. I'm like, those aren't people. Look at those guys. Yeah, so
look at those guys.
Like, look at these freaks, just running in the Utah woods. All right, circus is in town. Yeah, I don't know at the end of the day, but I don't know what else you call them. And then, of course, Are they a subcategory? Or is a hat man a subcategory?
Right.
A grinning man? Or Slender Man's a whole other thing. That's a whole other can of worms, because when you're talking about, well, if people are seeing them again, it was just something made up, but now it's real because it's a tulpa, right? Like, it's a whole, like, just amalgamation of different things that you can put under demons or shadow person. But at the end of the day, I really don't know.
Yeah, it's really interesting about shadow people. I have a friend who's been he calls himself the shadow people hunter, but he
that's hardcore. So what? Tell me about this hunter. Well,
he's just a cool guy. He's actually one of the friends who believes me about my stories, and he I don't know if you've heard about the shadow people in Big Sur, California. It's a pretty popular story right now, but we live fairly close to Big Sur. We live probably an hour and a half from Big Sur, and a lot of gorgeous just greenery, and it's like pines by the sea type of land, just this gorgeous old sort of Native American land. And he always jokes because he goes out to these areas where supposedly these shadow people manifest, and he's like, man, I always go there, and it's just like a gorgeous gorge, and it's just beautiful. Like, I'm going there to be freaked out. Like, I'm not going there to dive in the gorge and suntan and drink a beer, which is what he ends up doing. He's like, man, I want to see these people. But him and I are always talking. He's like, man, maybe it's not normally the people who seek. Like, I'm seeking to see these shadow people. I say
it all the time, and it's so frustrating. So he goes out there. How often does he go out there to do this?
I mean, he obviously he has a job and he's pretty busy, but he's gone out probably, I don't know, a few times. And
so he's going out like camping, and he'll just like
he loves to camp anyway. So he's like, you know what? And that's actually a spot where like a lot of folks in California go to camp. So
like two birds
with
one stone.
Exactly. So he's like, I'm gonna go kill two birds with one stone. I'm gonna catch me some shadow people.
Totally normal weekend.
Just like get down. And literally every time cause it's so pretty there. I mean, I would definitely recommend it. In fact, it would be a good spot for you to go because of all the strange stuff that happens there. But
it's within driving distance too. I do need to do that.
Right. And it's where like a lot of the hippie movement happened actually. So it's got some really cool history there, but so he goes out there and he loves to camp and hike and all that stuff. So he's like, I'll kill two birds with one stone, see these shadow peeps, and like never catches them. But then there's so many reports of just like, Johnny disinterested, walking around with like his hiking boots on with his just this like disinterested scowl.
He's like, this fool can see him. Why can't I?
And that guy bumps into him,
So why is he this seeker of specifically the shadow people? What's the obsession there?
I don't know. He's one of those guys who kind of he hears my stories and he's like, man, that's so cool. Like I never see anything, dude. Like I'm like the guy who just like I can't even pray for like 5 minutes. Like I fall asleep, dude. I'm talking about like meditating for 3 to 4 hours, and I mean, he just has never had anything trippy, like, again, unless he's burying it, but I really believe him. I'm like, no, dude, I mean, maybe for whatever reason you're just not, but he also totally believes in it. I mean, he's always been kind of like an adventurous type, and him and I relate on that level, and he loves to do things like, he loves even to like metal detect. He's like, man, him and I always talk, we're like, man, let's go out in the forest and try to find us some Spanish like conquistador coins and be wealthy for the rest of our lives. But so he goes out. So he's just intrigued because like, again, like I'm like, hint, there's a lot of that stuff happening over in Big Sur. And so he's like, hey man, I'm going to drive up. I'm going to camp. I'm going to go hiking, see me some shadow people. And like, it never happens. I
can relate. And you've heard me say that. I'm waiting for the second confirmation experience to happen to me. And it's not, I'm going to Google right now, distance from Vegas to Big Sur. I mean, I didn't find Bigfoot, so maybe I can find the shadow people again. Yeah, I'm actually heading to Utah.
Oh, really?
In a couple of weeks, and I'm going to the exact location of my sighting all those years ago. So we'll see if they want to come back out and say hello. Yeah.
Wow. That'd be so, I don't want to say cool because that might be frightening, but.
Right. It's kind of mixed feelings about it, but I'm ready. I'm like, all right, well, let's do this. It's about time.
But that's what's I always say so sick. It's like a sickness for folks like us who have experienced things and have that kind of adventurous spirit. I always tell folks, like, once you experience it, it is kind of a hook. I mean,
100%.
Yeah, like I said, even though I've purposely have turned off my experiences now because I feel like I just have to be in this different mode of my life, I still am hooked. I mean, I taught when I meet somebody who's had just like an encounter, I'm like a total geek, I can't get enough of it,
Oh, you know how this is so random, but you know how before we hopped on, I was like, oh, I'm a little nervous because there's a thunderstorm coming over, but I'm just sitting here watching Preacher, or the show Preacher on AMC. And it's funny you were saying about how it hits you, that first time and you cannot get over it and it kind of hooks you. It's funny because there is a vampire on the show Preacher, and he's actually a junkie. He's on and off the stuff or whatever. And he's trying to get this guy to talk to him, and he just wants to become his friend. So he gets a bunch of drugs and he takes it up to the guy's hotel room. And it's just funny you say that because he just said, Kaz is like, the vampire's like, well, for your first time, you got to mainline this stuff. So he's, it's very graphic. He's taking it and sticking it into his neck, right? But that's exactly what it's like when you have that first experience. It's like mainlining the paranormal and just the unknown. And it just, It lights that fire and it never goes out.
And there is the playful part. See, we're talking about the playful side. I mean, even with, God, and again, not that I've liked my encounters, but even with the demonic, it sounds weird, but when I've encountered folks who are possessed and seen that whole experience go on, and then seen them, I don't know what's the word I could use, forgive the religious term, but I guess set free is maybe a good phrase. It's frightening, and it's like, oh my God, I never want to see that again. And then when you turn the crystal paradigm, it's like, well, I mean, it also was kind of cool. It's kind of that weird tilt between, it's just speaking about the demonic stuff for sure. Oh. It's like that weird, but it's that weird thing. Like, I'm like, I know when I've seen that stuff happen, I'm not, it's not like I'm sitting there going, oh man, this is so cool. Like, hey, Mr. Demon, let's have a cup of coffee, but at the same time, I'm like, when it's all done, I'm like, wow, that was kind of a rush.
That's one of my favorite subjects, I think, is demonic possession. Sounds really dark, I know, but that's just me. I find it fascinating that someone can speak an ancient Sumerian language, right, in this completely different tone, like a baritone voice, and it's like an 11-year-old girl. That's insane, and I love it.
Yeah, Shannon, I've actually seen a 16-year-old young lady that I actually knew quite well can attest to her, in quote-unquote, normalcy, who had some kind of a possession get set free, and had a very high, just a kind of a, I don't know, classically high female soprano, I guess, voice. And, if you would have heard the male speaking through her, you'd be a believer. You're like, wow, that's like a monotone, weird man speaking to the person in front of her, I get why you're so drawn to it. It's definitely very, what's the word I want to use? I guess it's very dramatic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I just listened to, you were saying John Paul, right? Or who was it you were talking about? I just listened to that episode. Oh, with the gentleman who saw that little creepy guy up on the. I changed the,
End of the Fray, radio group on Facebook. Are you in there? I'll put you in there. Anyhow, I changed the group photo to that. One of, Chris Holm, one of the listeners, he said I was listening to that and it really disturbed me and I couldn't get it out of my head, so I decided to draw it. So he drew John Paul Capice's pot-bellied demon, where I was like, what the hell is it eating? Well, souls, of course. And he drew the demon and even the alligator that John Paul had tossed at the demon, because what the hell else are you going to do when you're a little kid, right?
So I was like, I was thinking too, when I was listening to that, it was kind of funny because I interact with you guys when you're talking. It's funny. I mean, my wife thinks if I'm driving with my wife, I'll be talking to you guys like, no, I think it's this, and I'm driving, he's saying that, and I was like, why didn't nobody say gargoyle? Like, I kind of had that thought of a gargoyle, because if you've been like in Europe, that's kind of how they look.
Yeah, they do have those little bellies and everything.
They look kind of like a gremlin-y gargoyle. Yeah. And I know an older woman who's been a lifelong sort of spiritual follower who, when she was like in her earlier teens, had a lot of demonic encounters, and she said that for whatever reason they would manifest like gargoyles, like crawl across the walls, kind of like what he was saying.
Oh man, yeah.
Just these gargoyles, and they would kind of like look at her and then sort of scamper off, almost like, yeah, it's not creepy,
just
but
never sleep again. Just who needs sleep? Nobody needs sleep.
Right. I'm like, man, that's messed up. But yeah, it's funny because I'm hearing you guys talk about that. And I'm like, gargoyle, say gargoyle.
You're
it's
hollering
a gargoyle.
At the gargoyle. I know what it is. I had somebody else say that they would talk to us while we were bantering, or I was bantering with the guests, and they're like, I just have conversations with you guys when you're going off. So here it says Big Sur is about 8.5 hours, so not too bad, but that would be a great location for a little ITF get-together and go shadow people hunting. We can, meet up with your friend and see what we see. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, that would be cool. I mean, that would be so fun. And like I said, if you've never been out there anyways, I mean, again, if all we end up doing is jumping in the gorge and drinking a beer,
right? Not a bad way to spend the
right
weekend.
I mean, it's still the gorgeous coast of California. And like, you seem like you're pretty fit, so there's some really good hiking and I mean, just enjoyable things. Also, like a lot of mountain lions, and I'm kind of nerdy about mountain lions. I just love mountain lions, but in
a freaky stalk you kind of way, huh?
Yeah, it's funny. Before we get off, I wanted to say, again, I keep praising the show, but one of my favorite things about the show is people are so normal. You guys, I mean, here we are talking about normal things. We're talking about hiking, and I love that about the show because people who have these experiences, yeah, they might have gifts, like you said. There might be a certain gift or something, but really, we're all just normal. We're all just trying to get by and figure out life, and that's one of the things that I love about the show. Like when I was listening to the DDoS episode, I was cracking up when you guys were going off about boar. I was like, oh my God! Like we're talking about freaky dogmen and Sasquatch, and then now we're talking about how freaky the boars are. And the only reason I was laughing is because, dang girl, I know that's so true. Like I have been out, we have a lot of boar here.
Dude, and they're scary.
You know what? If you don't believe in demons, then just believe a boar. Just believe in boars, because those suckers get a bite on you, you might not live.
Oh.
You know what I'm saying?
Just go check out those chompers and that anger that they have behind the chompers.
They are so sinister. But I just thought it was so funny. I'm like, he like interacts with Sasquatch. He stands there and he looks at like Bones Pop with a dog man, and here he is. He's just a normal dude like you and me talking about how freaky boars are. I
don't even remember how we got on that subject, but it happened tonight with you. We're just like talking about just randomness. But yeah, and you're right. We might be out on these badass expeditions to search for shadow people like your friend or Dee goes out for the dog man, bless his heart, right? But we all just trying to get along. Still gotta watch out for the boars, and we get thorns in our pants and whatever other maladies may happen to us.
Well, yeah, and I think, we're talking about we talk about Sasquatch and Dogman and even some of these demonic things. I mean, you could call them, I guess, any of them apex predators, really. And this is something that's more powerful than us to an incredible level. But the beautiful thing is that there's, I guess beautiful is a weird word, but I think when you seek these things, you also acknowledge the gorgeousness of what is there for maybe always everybody to see, which is like a cougar or a boar. Yeah. These things that really are just as frightening. Like, I mean, anybody who's ever been stalked by a cougar knows, like, man, like, like I said, with a boar, you don't have to even see a demon. You can just be stalked by a cougar, and you're like, damn, I just confronted a demon.
Yeah, that'll take care of you for a while. You're like, I'm going to skip the camping for a little bit. My neck is good the way it is. I don't need the puncture ones. All the vertebrae are in a line. Good stuff.
Right.
Yeah, so honestly, like, I think the Big Sur thing is kind of a cool idea because, like, you know, we've got the forest and the Bigfoot, and hey, maybe there's dogmen out there, there's shadow people. So we can have shout out to the California peeps, right? Got Brandon Dalo is moving out there. Did you know that Ryan Sprague is going to be moving out to LA?
Really?
Yeah, of course. And Sam, who will soon be back in the States with us. And my buddy Jared Best out there. So maybe we can get a little group together.
You know, that'd be a great idea, Shannon. I think, because I mean, there's these conferences, right, that all of us can go to where we talk about all these things, but sometimes a conference is just so magnificent and large. And,
it can be overwhelming. And all of a sudden the weekend's over, and they're great, but.
They're totally great. I mean, I'm not dogging them, and you have these keynote speakers and all this stuff, but, you know, that's a great idea. You know, I mean, I know that you're really busy, but, you know, wouldn't it be cool to get a bunch of these folks together, just like we're saying, just in a normal setting, shooting the shit and talking about these trippy experiences, and then also maybe being a little bit of like an adventurous looking for the shadow folk or whatever. And but again, just having that like camaraderie in person, just sort of sharing these stories, sharing a beer, sharing a whiskey, just laughing, being human, and also, you know, I guess, you know, extraordinary in a very just average way, you know.
Averagely weird, you know. That's what we are. That's a new hashtag. There you go. Hey, you're welcome, people.
You're welcome, people.
I still hate hashtags to this day, but you have to use them because it's a file system. Everyone's like, what's a hashtag? It took me forever to learn that. Like,
my gosh.
What is a hashtag? And someone's like, it's a file system. I'm like, oh, okay.
I literally just, it took me so long to buy into the whole world of social media and smartphones and everything. And so my wife used to laugh because for the longest time I was like, man, I better figure out this hashtag thing. And I was all butthurt about it, you know, and for the longest time she said I was like the worst hashtagger. Like I would just hashtag the most random hashtag that would just have one.
It's just yours. Yeah. I did that too. For a long time, I just didn't do it. I refused to do it. I was like, no, I'm going to put a normal caption under my photo, period. Right. But then I realized, like, you know, a hashtag is pretty darn useful. Right. Yeah. What was I going to say? I was going to say something. I forget. I'm always doing that. Hashtag no memory.
Hashtag no memory. It's called mom brain, Shannon.
Oh, it so is. Absolutely.
God, I can't even believe that honestly, if I shower that day and brush my teeth and like maybe get to the gym for like an hour, man, I had a good.
A whole hour? Yeah, I know, right?
Right, a whole hour, yeah. I just get 15 minutes.
Oh, totally do a whole workout. Whole body, 10 minutes. I got this. Cardio and whole body.
Right.
You're like, oh, I'm just fried. Got it all.
Right, yeah.
Well, Luke, thank you so much for coming on. This has been really fun. And hey, maybe we really could pull something together. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility because it's still within driving distance. It's 8 hours. It's not, 25 hours of driving.
Right.
So,
right.
Maybe we really could pull something together.
Yeah, I mean, it's closer for all of us California people, obviously, but you're the ringleader, so, we're waiting on you.
I'm rubbing my hands like evil. Ringleader. Yes. Yeah, maybe we could. I'll put a little line out and see what everybody's got going on. I mean, I'm sure we'll have to just look at things like weather and
right.
When everyone's available is the biggest thing. But just trying to look at weather and such would be probably the biggest thing because you can't almost get anything if it's raining or real windy or anything like that. But it's on the coast, so that could be a little tricky. I have to work around it. That's all right.
Right. Yep. Yeah. And then if you have any more questions for me, I know it's a big gamut we talked about today. We have all over the place with so many different interesting